All right, Kirk, I think we're good to go. We've got 16 people online.
Okay.
Agenda for today, roll call. We'll do our normal. This is very normal for what we're not doing anything out of the ordinary here. Kirk will give us a State of the Union, which includes looking at financials. We'll talk a little bit about return to play. We've got the summit coming up in November, the Hall of Fame in November, and then a Women's All-Stars and the 50th anniversary celebration tournament in December. We'll talk about registration because that's ready and open. Competitions, we have one election. We'll just look at our brand, and then we have some celebrations and then a Q&A. And then the next AGM will just be in January, usually January, February. So we can start with that roll call. I think I've gotten almost everybody. So I'm just going to list off who I have present. For Abilene, I have Kevin Phillipson. Alliance, we have Michael and Sydney. Sorry? Austin Blacks, Michael Norton. Dallas Reds, Jeff Robertson. Denton, Andrew Chapman. Grand Prairie Men and Women.
Wendy, this is Andrew Chapman. I've got Art Anderson with me, our coach as well. So there's two of us.
Okay. Well, who was it? Sorry?
Artie.
Art Anderson.
Art Anderson?
Yeah, Marie's in Hawaii, unfortunately, so she can't make it. So.
That's right. She said she might try, and I said, don't try. Don't come.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, stay in bed. Yeah. Or the bar.
Yeah. We also have James Rangel from Little Rock. Oh, Zach from Hurt also. Let's see. And then Hunter from West Houston. So that's the clubs. And then Alex McCullough from Panther City. And then board members, Kirk Tate, Dodge, Zach again, John Curlis, and then non-board members, Kat and I as admins. And did I miss anybody? Do we need to add anybody else?
Wendy, my apologies. James Rangel, Corpus Christi Rugby Club.
Oh, sorry, that's my bad.
I was about to say, did James move to Little Rock?
That's when I try to do it from memory.
That's a big jump, man. I was gonna mention something, but I didn't want to interrupt you, Wendy.
No, it's when I try to do it from memory, and I just shouldn't do that. I'm not that good. All right, perfect. Well, we'll try to keep an eye on if people join later, and we'll add them to the roll call. So then it's up to Kirk.
All right.
Where we're at.
So, State of the Union. Well, we're here. We were able to play more rugby this summer and this spring than a large part of the country. But obviously this has been an unprecedented almost 24 months if you go back to USA Rugby experiencing its financial problems and going into bankruptcy, followed on by COVID and cancellation of most of our season, cancellation of 15's national championships, 7's national championships last year. I've been in rugby for 38 years and never seen anything like, the last 24 months. So is the union where we'd like it to be? Of course not. Is it doing pretty well given everything that's happened? Yes. Are we doing well compared to other parts of the country? Yes. And both in terms of our registrations over the past 12 months, in terms of our active membership, games played, revenue, we're doing better than a lot of the country. But anybody who's following the news knows that we're not out of the woods yet. And we are planning and proceeding as if we're going to have a full and uninterrupted season. but I sure would like to see the numbers going in the opposite direction of the way they've been going over the last 6 weeks. And, we can't rule out the possibility that COVID will impact our season again. I say that just looking at the numbers. I don't have any indication from USA Rugby or any indication, from other quarters to suggest that our season will be interrupted. But, the reports of hospitalizations and infections are greater than where they were when the season was canceled or the season was put on pause by USA Rugby 18 months ago. So we should not relax. If we want to preserve our season, we should not relax our precautions. We should be doing everything we can in our communities to be safe and do the right things and follow the guidelines of medical professionals. And, plan on or be prepared for, what might come. So that's the State of the Union from a high level. We'll go ahead and I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and start looking at the financials specifically, which is our next thing here. In just a moment, let me bring up the spreadsheet and share it. Come on. Well, if it doesn't load from drop, there it comes. Okay, Wendy, is that visible to everybody?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. So, as always, we typically try to budget, anticipate dues being low and expenses being high. That is to budget conservatively. When we first set the budget, in a good year, our normal dues revenue is around 115 to 120,000. So last year, we already knew that COVID was impacting things when we created the budget. So we thought we were being conservative by setting our budget dues amount at about 2/3 of what we would typically receive. As you can see, we actually received less than 1/3 of what we would typically receive, about 37,000. Part of that is because as the season wore on and we saw that more and more of it was going to be canceled, we cut TRU dues in half for the 2021 cycle. And so that's part of the reason why those dues are that much less. So in actuality, we've registered about the same amount of people as what we had budgeted registering last year. So our target there was not that off, but because so much of the season was taken away, we reduced dues by 50%. So our actual dues income was about 50% of what we budgeted. But we did that because we knew our expenses were going to be drastically less because so many games had been canceled, and they were. We had budgeted 60,000 for referees, which is based on the per match fee that we pay for referees. We only spent a little less than 14. We budgeted 6,000 for championships. We only had about 1,000. And playoffs and all that kind of thing. Player grants were actually a little bit up, but because there were no 15 nationals, our playoff travel grants, which is where this club rewards other item line is mainly playoff travel grants. Those were far below what we would normally have because we only had the sevens this year. Administration expenses were also under budget, although not by as high a percentage as, say, competitions, because that admin stuff exists regardless. A lot of those expenses exist regardless. You still have a website even if you aren't having games and that kind of thing. Our all-star budget, much less, and most of that was for virtual clinics and things that we hosted. By the way, all-stars, this should probably be more properly labeled development, and in fact, when we get it out here, it's most of it is skills and coaching and stuff. And then on the summit, we carried over from last year an 8,000 target, even though last year the summit came very close to breaking even. This year, because we postponed the summit into November, when normally it would be in August, we have about $6,000 in positive revenue, and that's advanced ticket sales on banquet tickets and so forth for the Hall of Fame for this fall. But we've only spent some of the money for that event. We've only got deposits down and so forth. So we're looking good in terms of coming in well under budget on the summit. But don't assume that the summit is going to make a $6,000 profit. We're getting revenue up front, and there'll be a lot of expenses on the back end. So that's a positive number, but it's not it's not as cool looking as you might think. But total expenses for the year were $28,000, meaning that we came in with a positive net income on the year. There are still a few things outstanding that haven't cleared yet. So, I expect we're going to be closer to break even once all the final numbers are in and, checks have cleared and so forth. I didn't have time to do a better job of labeling, so I'm going to talk through what the pie charts are for you, but they are color coded to the items over here. We had budgeted about, and this is basically based on your dues dollar. So pretty much almost all of our income is dues. We do have in some years we've had sponsorship, interest, fines, so forth. But almost all of our income is dues. And then if our dues income doesn't match what we budgeted and we need more, then we pull from savings to fill that in. Last year, because we were anticipating, conservatively assuming we were going to spend the money but get a lot less in dues, we were budgeting for a massive injection from savings in order to break even. Didn't have to do that. We actually added to savings instead. So we budgeted about 50% for competitions, and that's this nice big blue half of the pie here. But in actuality, we only spent about 39% of our dues, of your dues, on competitions this year, because there just weren't that many games to ref. Obviously, I got this color wrong here. So this one here, this 16.7%, 16.34% is actually supposed to be this pink slice. That is grants, playoff travel grants, things of that nature. We were almost exactly spot on that. It was 16.7 in reality. So that's pretty much just what we would have expected, and doing well there. This 17, this green, which for some reason I got pink over here, that's our admin. Admin costs became as our revenue went down and our competitions went down. As I mentioned, some of those admin costs are fixed. And so admin wound up becoming a larger portion of our budget than it would be in typical years. Then development, all-stars, things of that nature. We anticipated spending about 10% of our budget on that, wound up being very small, just 3.5%. Then this was planning to spend about 6% on the TRU Summit, which is also largely development expenses in the Hall of Fame. Summit is education, but we break it out as a separate event for budget purposes. And we're actually, instead of spending that on that, instead we've got a contribution to savings of about 8.5% of your dues wound up going to savings this year. So that's a visual representation. I'll clean up these color labels. Just to give you a sense, we can look at, I can go look at last year's, just to give you an idea. Of what last year looked like, with me having better time to make those graphs pretty and match them up. So again, typically competitions are a big portion of our budget because some of the season, since we canceled the season in March last year, it was lower. You go down to your grants. Grants we budgeted because playoffs were canceled last year for COVID. They were way down. Admin costs, you notice 14.7, 14.2, they're largely fixed costs. You're going to spend about the same amount of money regardless. Development stayed roughly the same because most of our development stuff was in all-star stuff was in the fall. And so it was not affected by COVID last year. As mentioned, the summit, basically, we canceled it last year. And then the year before, it almost broke even, but we canceled it last year due to COVID. So there was nothing there for summit. And then we wound up, because most of our dues were collected at the beginning of the season and games were canceled at the end of the season. This savings in referee fees wound up going to savings. So that was last year, just to give you a sense of the difference. So it's a similar pattern. You can see the effect of COVID and season cancellation in our budget, both how it affects our dues and how it affects our expenses. So let's go ahead and before I go to proposed for next year, let's just go ahead and review our where we are monetarily. So we, track, and if anybody wants to see, we can show you all the dues, every deposit, every check. And that's for a total of deposits of $37,625. Operating will show deposits and checks written. As I mentioned, there are some outstanding checks that haven't cleared yet, some outstanding grants that haven't been paid yet. So we won't see them all here, but they are I've put most of those into the budget total. So our savings, we've got about $95,000 in savings, about 85,000. We've added about 10,000 in savings over this year. And our revenues, as we mentioned, we already showed the total on the other side. The revenues are about 37,000. Here we go, 37,000 on revenues. There's a breakdown of grants. So checks to TRA, grants for travel, administration, money paid. So the data is all here if someone had specific questions, but the summary it's all summed up here so that you can all see where the union is spending your dues, how the union is spending your dues. Our anticipation is always to spend about half the dues on, or slightly more sometimes, on competitions. Then we spend about another 15% or so on development clinics, all-stars. We spend another 15% or so on grants. That is grants to players, grants to coaches, grants to travel grants to clubs that go to playoffs. And then the administration costs, we keep, we try to keep under 20%, get it down to 15 if we can. So the vast majority of your dues, with the exception of the time that Wendy and Kat spend doing the day-to-day admin stuff, all the TRU board are volunteers. There is money allotted for board travel. I don't think that we have ever not come in significantly under budget on board travel. Most of us make the trips we make on our own dime, and in most cases, we don't ask the union for reimbursement. So we're not spending a lot of money on, we're certainly not spending it on ourselves. And we're trying to keep the vast majority of your dues goes straight back to you in the form of services, grants, competitions, referees. Here's the proposed budget. Now, what I've done is I took our budget numbers that we proposed from the last time we had a budget for a full season and put that in as a baseline. If we do that and we do all of our expenses based on the matches that we've set up for the centralized schedule and what we have traditionally paid in a full season for grants and education and all-stars and all these other different types of things, then we would need to bring in and spend about 20,000 from savings. Now, again, we always budget conservatively. We try to underestimate dues, overestimate expenses. We haven't pulled any large amounts from savings in years. We pretty much try to run on a break-even budget and spend what we take in dues and roll it back out to you in the form of services. But we always, like I say, try to shoot conservatively and assume that things are going to be more expensive and that our dues revenue is going to be less. The reason I want to highlight this is it's going to be very, very important for us to, as clubs and as an organization, to really work hard to recruit and encourage people to come back to the sport after a long hiatus. And I'm encouraged by the Summer 7 season and how successful it was that we'll get there. But if we play as many games as we have scheduled, and we also add in a percentage, another 20% contingency to cover friendlies and games that are unexpected that we don't know about now. If we play all those games, we're going to spend a lot of money on referees. If we do have 15s nationals and we do have 7s nationals, and we are successful as we have been in years past, and we're sending multiple teams that qualify for those national tournaments, we'll spend a big chunk in travel grant money. We would very much hope that we'll be able to do our fall all-star event again this year. And if so, we'll spend that money. But because we have seen that the summit is moving towards being self-sustaining, that number has been reduced to 2,000 on the assumption that we're going to continue to generate revenue for the summit and keep it on a, move it towards being positive. Now, we don't have any sponsorships in place right now. And again, so budgeting conservatively, we budget 0 there. If there are sponsorships, well, then obviously that increases revenue, and this injection from savings goes down, because this is if we spend everything that we expect to spend and we don't get any other revenue than what we expect to get, then this is where we would be in spending savings. So if this number here were to be, let's say, 60%, roughly 70,000, then to make that work, to take that $45,000 in dues off, you'd have to spend another $45,000 in savings if you played the same number of games, same number of travel grants, same number of everything else. So it has a ripple effect through where the savings goes up and up and up, or the spending out of savings goes up and up and up. So we have an ambitious schedule planned, a whole lot of matches. The total number of matches that we are anticipating playing this year just in is about 320 total games in the union. And that is a lot of games. If our membership goes way down, we would expect those number of games to go down. But we need folks to, if we want to really make this season sing and really come back strong and do a lot of good stuff, we need to do 2 things. We need to be cognizant of doing everything we can to keep our clubs out of trouble. We don't want any clubs becoming hot spots. We don't want any clubs becoming centers of infection. We don't want to see people get sick if it can be avoided. I know sometimes it can't. I know there's no perfect solution. And we need membership registration to be strong. And that's what's going to enable us to play all these games and do all of these things and do it without bankrupting or without burning through our savings. We're not going to bankrupt ourselves, but do it without burning an inordinate amount of savings. As mentioned, we've been rolling along for years now with savings at around that 80 to 100,000 mark. We've been pretty successful in doing everything that we need to do without cutting heavily into our savings. And we have cut, to the extent that we have cut into our savings, it's because y'all as members told us a number of years ago that you wanted to see some of that money that had been sitting in savings for years and wasn't doing anything for us invested back into the union. And that's when we started doing the summit, started doing more all-stars, more coaching clinics, more things of that nature. And we're working towards getting those events, as I mentioned, to be revenue neutral, if not profitable, and making progress in that regard. Any questions on financials? Exciting, isn't it? All right, if you're asking a question, you're on mute. So we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that. If you have questions on that you want to ask later, by all means, hit me up and I can go and go into that. So return to play, this means COVID-19. As you know, we did put a 30-day pause in place That action was spurred primarily based on the lack of available hospital space throughout the majority of our union, which is Texas. And it is also in alignment with Governor Abbott's executive order from last spring about, about hospital space and the effect of that on activities. We did attempt to encourage or provide an exemption for players and clubs to continue to do full contact activities if in their particular region, hospital space was not taxed beyond the critical threshold, and the participants had antibodies, whether that was either through natural infection or vaccination. As you know, the TRU has been encouraging vaccination, that is through Facebook posts. That is in accordance with the CDC, the WHO, federal government, even state government, our governor, our lieutenant governor, our senators, our presidents, our last president, our current president, all of these folks are vaccinated, and many of them have been publicly vaccinated and will encourage vaccinations whether or not they favor or oppose mandated or vaccinations. Vaccination is, by all of the scientific evidence and all of the medical recommendations, the single best way to tamp down this epidemic and to avoid getting seriously ill from COVID. There are breakthrough infections, but they tend to be much milder in their symptoms, and over 90% of the folks who are currently in critical condition in our ICUs in Texas, per State Department of Health statistics, are unvaccinated. The reason that hospital availability is so important is we do not want to see one of our members, one of our teammates, suffer a spinal injury, a brain injury, compound fracture, a serious injury, and then not be able to get the treatment they need because there's no hospital availability. Now, we did, as Austin Hans had some questions about the policy. They emailed the board. They specifically asked the board to share their concerns with the rest of the union's club administrators, presidents, contacts that we have. We, of course, did that and passed that on. There's been an extensive discussion on email regarding the policy, and the board is continuing to take all that on board and monitor that. In response to that, let me go through just a few items. First, on the legal side, HIPAA does not apply to the TRU. HIPAA is a narrow piece of federal legislation that applies to medical records kept by insurance companies and health care providers primarily. Does not apply to the Texas Rugby Union. It is not relevant to anything that we are doing. We are not covered by it. We have no obligations under it. It was not designed or written for the TRU or for any organizations like us. Regarding government mandates or bans on mandates, we're not a governmental agency, so not subject to Governor Abbott's directives regarding that. We do not receive state funding or state licensing, so we are not subject to any strings tied to that. And we don't have customers. We're a member organization. So those regulations also don't apply to us. We have 3 attorneys presently on the TRU board, one of whom is specializes in insurance law, and the TRU is on firm legal ground. Now, that does not mean that the policy that we have is perfect or the correct policy or one that you want. It is absolutely within members, appropriate for members to question whether a policy is necessary, well-designed, well-written, adequately communicated, consistently enforced. Those are all absolutely valid topics of discussion, but it's not a legal issue, guys. There is no legal impact or law that says we can or can't do what we're doing. We're on firm legal ground. Another allegation, or not allegation, another point that came up was talking about politics. The TRU board is diverse in its political opinions, and was unanimous on the policy. The vaccines were developed under a Republican administration with their Operation Warp Speed and their emergency approval process, and distributed by a Democratic administration. The medical experts who are recommending those vaccines and overseeing those programs, the pharmaceutical companies that develop those vaccines, were the same under a Republican administration as under a Democratic administration. It is not a political decision. We could do absolutely nothing, and some people would applaud us and some people would be furious with us. We could shut everything down and demand that everybody was vaccinated and wore masks all the time. Some people would applaud us and some people would be furious with us. We are volunteers trying to thread a policy needle here and do what we can to protect our community and to hopefully do whatever we can do, however little it is, to ensure that we're able to play rugby this fall. So we put in a policy to pause play during a 30-day period where nothing was going on, where we felt it would cost us virtually nothing to slow things down, and it might help in terms of having a higher level of immunity within our community, again, whether that is natural or vaccine induced, and reduce the chance of transmission through rugby activities during a period of time when we're not going to be doing much anyway. We talked about having that pause be longer in the board. You can read the minutes of the board discussion. But we ended it so that it would end 30 days before the first league match, so that provided conditions permitted and things don't deteriorate even further, all of our teams would be able to have a full month of contact training before their first league match. There were no matches scheduled during this period. We didn't put it in place until after National Sevens had completed. From the board's perspective, it seemed like low-hanging fruit. It seemed like a simple thing we could do that would cause very little disruption to our members in a period of time where there were no games scheduled, not even friendlies. We had nothing on our calendar, no refs assigned to any event, and perhaps in some small way help move our community towards a higher level of immunity and lower levels of risk and infection, all with an eye towards making sure that this season is not disrupted by COVID, if at all possible. Obviously, a fair number of you don't agree. Obviously, a fair number of you were not happy with that policy decision. And it is, a policy that we can change and adapt and discuss. But as I open the floor for discussion, there's two things that I'm not going to waste our collective time with, because as I've already described, it's simply not true and it's simply not relevant. The first one is, we have not done anything that is prohibited by law, and we have not run afoul of any legal mandates. And we do have, while we don't have any doctors on this board, we do have attorneys on the board. The second thing is, it's not political. We have conservatives, liberals, Republicans, Democrats, independents, libertarians, and people who frankly don't give a shit about politics in our union and on our board. Doesn't matter what we do, we're going to have people throwing rocks at us. There is no solution as long as COVID is out there at the level that it's at right now. There's no solution that the TRU can put in place that everybody is going to be happy with. It's not a political discussion. It's not a legal discussion. It is a very legitimate and appropriate discussion of what we as a community want and what we as a community think will best serve our members and be most likely to help us have a full season when play resumes. So I will open the floor, and that is including opening the floor to board members. And you can ask me or the board members questions, express your opinions, and with, under those terms. So the floor is open. I hear somebody unmuted, but I don't see hands. Yeah.
Michael Norton.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, so it's Austin Blacks. I hear what you said about the Huns taking official position. We don't have anything official on this. Although among other board members, we are concerned about enacting this now when nothing is going on, rather than having put out some kind of a post or message that the TRU or RRC is concerned and are keeping an eye on it. We're concerned that this is going to end up continuing on and on and on yet again. And that there's the possibility that COVID isn't going to go away 100%. With people getting vaccinated and the possibility of people who are vaccinated still contracting it. Do we have an end in sight on this?
That's a great question. And the answer, for me at least, is I don't know. If the hospitals weren't all at maxed out capacity, we wouldn't have taken this step. That is what triggered the decision to do a pause on play. Obviously, we played more sevens in Texas than any other union in the country this summer. Obviously, we're not opposed to playing rugby. Obviously, we don't want to be in the position of shutting down rugby. Like I said, we played more rugby in Texas than anywhere this summer. I can't tell you what the future holds. Your guess is as good as mine.
So the basis is on bed availability.
Yes, that was the key criteria of this pause.
All right, so as long as we have a bed availability improved down the line, regardless of the other factors, we're going to be hopefully good going forward.
Yeah, that would be yes. I think hopefully good going forward. I would agree with that. Absolutely. And our reasoning in supporting and promoting vaccination is that, according to the CDC and U.S. Health and Human Services, and even the Texas Department of Health, is that the single biggest driver of the increase in hospitalizations is due to unvaccinated persons, and about half of that is Delta variant. Of those have the more contagious Delta variant. So it is, while there are breakthrough infections, the likelihood that a breakthrough infection lands you in the ICU is drastically less, according to the CDC, according to U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is drastically less than it is if you're unvaccinated. So that was the reasoning behind the policy. Wendy's brought up and shared on the screen from the TRU site the policy where we list out the hospitalization rates in the various areas. The graphs that she's showing, they come from the CDC. This is a website that aggregates CDC results and gives us data. Now, this is just ICU capacity. We were also looking at total hospital capacity and where that goes. So it's not just infection rate alone. As you can see, the infection rate from this graph here, infection rates can be as high as they were last spring, but with fewer hospitalizations. We all know there's people who have mild or largely asymptomatic. Mild symptoms are asymptomatic, but high hospitalization rates are very closely correlate to unvaccinated folks who are exposed to the virus.
Kirk, and if I can just jump in real quick, Dave Dodge.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Mike, I mean, the reason that we opened up back in April when we did is because the numbers were dropped below the threshold that, frankly, it's a threshold that we didn't even set. It's one that the state set to look at when they were making rulings on things that needed to happen. So that's when they dropped below the thresholds back in the spring. That's when we opened it up, and that's how we got to play in the spring. Got to play all our sevens. The unfortunate fact is that those numbers have spiked again with the Delta variant and the frankly, I think the lack of people getting vaccinated at rates that probably make sense. So,
and we actually referenced the general order from the governor in the policy on the website, regarding hospitalization rates and numbers that we've used as our guideline. Now, we don't have exactly the same data in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Different area, those different states, they all have their own different rules, laws, and local conditions. But because all but a handful of our clubs are in Texas, and we didn't want to have different standards, we are applying the Texas 15% hospitalization threshold, availability threshold, across all our regions. And, right now those other regions have sufficient hospital capacity. But just to give you a sense of how complicated this is, I know John White from Oklahoma made an excellent point in some of the online discussion that the problem in Oklahoma apparently is not the availability of beds, but the availability of nurses and doctors. They're having a human resources shortage in Oklahoma that is, exacerbating things, even if, beds are available. Unfortunately, we need both a rule that is clear and easy for us to manage as volunteers, that we can actually get reliable data for, and we need to avoid doing things based on anecdotal evidence, and ground our policies in firm data and firm law.
How does this compare to what other unions have done?
That's a great question. All over the place. There are some unions that pretty much have been much more aggressive in closing things down, in particular in the Pacific Northwest or the West Coast and the Northeast. And there have been unions that have been, more aggressive in keeping things open. Florida would be a good example there. Texas is probably in the middle in terms of our response, and we are probably more data oriented than most of the other unions. Now, part of that is not due to any choice by those unions. Some of those unions are in regions where the state government has taken, a much a different approach to COVID than state governments in our union. And so in some of those areas, the state governments have taken these choices out of the union's hands.
Okay. And then
but Texas is kind of a state's not going to make you do anything. Y'all do what you want, and unless you're a state agency or receiving some kind of state funds or licensing, it's the Wild West.
What about contingency planning, I guess, TRU financially and for membership in case this continues? A new variant or this or that, or for whatever reason.
Sure. So contingency planning on scheduling, has really been to schedule things as if we're going to be able to play. It's a lot easier to cancel things than it is to schedule them. And so we've always adopted let's schedule the summit, let's reserve the hotels, let's plan the events, let's plan the tournaments, let's schedule the season, because it's a heck of a lot easier to cancel those things if the world's on fire than it is to spin them up from nothing because we were sitting on our hands waiting for things to get better. So from a scheduling perspective, and I'll talk about financial in a second, from a scheduling perspective, our contingency is plan as if we're going to do everything that we want to do so that we're not limited by our own lack of planning down the road. Financially, we are in good shape. And the reason is to refer back to the graphs we were looking at earlier. The reason is that 80 to 85% of our expenses are directly related to rugby activity. They're related to 50% of our expenses are related to playing games, regular season games, paying for referees. Another chunk is for going to playoffs. Another chunk is for all-stars and summits and coaching clinics. And so if things shut down, we don't spend money. And we have $90,000 in the bank, and we've added to savings the last 2 years because of COVID cancellation. And that's even with cutting TRU dues in half last year. So financially, the union is not going to go broke if the Delta variant or another variant, if COVID radically impacts our activity. We actually have to walk a much tighter, walk a tougher tightrope financially when things are going great guns and we're playing rugby like mad. That's what costs money. So I'm not really concerned about the TRU financially. Now, I'll tell you, I am concerned about USA Rugby financially. USA Rugby is running on a skeleton staff. They're coming out of bankruptcy, and the salaries for national staff, the salaries for coaches, the money that they spend on offices, all overhead that we don't have as a volunteer organization is overhead that USA Rugby does have. And if USA Rugby doesn't get dues, USA Rugby has a problem. So I am not concerned about the TRU financially. I do have, concerns about how an extended shutdown would affect USA Rugby. I think that it would be a tough thing for USA Rugby. And it's been a tough thing for national unions all over the world, honestly. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, and I guess one thing I would add, I'm one of the guys at my club, badgering guys, always get sick, pushing them, tracking all that stuff, and staying on top of them. And I guess concern for me in the area to that responsibility is that by pausing it rather than putting a warning out, I feel like I'm going to there's some number of guys that I can get to sip well before we start playing. And because we paused things, I know there's going to be some of those guys are going to decide, well, I'm not going to sip until the day before the match because we will be concerned that this is going to get delayed on and on and on.
Yeah.
Or get reenacted. It may undo the pause, and then in a month, who's to say it won't get paused again?
Yeah. And that's
just an administrative, I guess, frustration. For me, I know it's going to be.
Yeah.
I know it's coming, so here we are.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I will, mea culpa. That is not an angle that we discussed or that I recall us discussing at any length in our board deliberations. Mea culpa, I'll take that on board. That's a very valid point.
Well, Kirk, I would say that we discussed it for a month before, and we did post in our TRU minutes that we were discussing things like this. So I would just encourage, because I know, Michael, I know you read the minutes. I know Bill Towdy reads the minutes, but I would just encourage clubs that we're super transparent about what we talk about.
Sure.
We spent 30 minutes discussing this in July, and then we kept looking at it. So I would say the things, the clues were out there is what I'm trying to say.
I think where Mike's coming from, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think where Mike's coming from is not his understanding of where we're at.
You belong on that horse, dude.
But the understanding of the average player who doesn't read the minutes, even if Mike sends them to him.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Gotcha.
Yeah. Whereas with a Facebook warning, a Facebook, we could have probably done more to help our administrators with, that communication plan. Is that right, Mike? Is that where you're coming from? Yeah.
Well, it is what it is. And I guess, it's more along the lines of there's going to be some guys most people don't read the minutes. Yeah, you're right. I do. And all they're going to see is, hey, things are paused.
Yeah. Well,
and so
you're right. And honestly, to a certain degree, and we all know this because it doesn't matter what the message is. Maybe the message is, we've got a game in 2 weeks. There are always going to be a certain number of people who, if they don't find that excuse to not sip, they'll find another one.
Yeah.
Michael,
a certain number of them are. It is endemic to our culture,
Right.
unfortunately. Or I think maybe to any culture that is dependent on young people in their 20s paying attention.
Hey, Kirk, and Michael, everybody on the call, hopefully this will help. Before the day is out, you will receive an email with the schedule. You'll have a couple of weeks to look at that and negotiate changes with your opponents as is customary. So
Sure.
Hopefully that'll generate some enthusiasm, and God willing, we'll be able to play the schedule.
Other questions, concerns, comments, suggestions?
No, I think we've been waiting on the schedule now for a couple of weeks, and that's where our members are saying, when are our games? Are we going to be shut down? That kind of thing. So if we can move ahead with actually knowing what's in place, and then if the shit hits the fan, we can cancel. But otherwise, we're starting to have people question whether they're going to show up this year. Their kids are starting to play this and that. So we really need to try and nail down a schedule for those players. And yeah, they're the ones that sip on Friday night before the first game. So it helps us in our planning to be able to say, hey, we've got games on this weekend, that weekend, this weekend, start sipping, that kind
Absolutely.
Hey guys, my apologies. That will go out today. So I apologize for the delay in that.
No worries, Dodge.
Are we going to have? Are we going to go over the new Sport Lomo, SIP, CMS in another section?
Well, it's not new. It's the same Sport Lomo CMS that we had last year. There is hopefully there's been an effort to improve the documentation, and there's been a lot of time spent in the last year, fixing bugs and hopefully improving the system. So we didn't have a Sport Lomo training session on the agenda for this meeting, but I am happy to talk to you all about Sport Lomo and give you an update or a status on what that is, where that's at.
Yeah, sure. Just so we can move on past this.
Sure.
Yeah, I would like to hear about what's new eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the same membership system as last year, but it has been a lot of tweaks, a lot of things bugs have been fixed. And when you go to the USA Rugby registration page, there is a help link or a help menu on the upper right-hand corner. You'll see help and a link. And if you click on that, it will open up a list of resources, both PDF documents and YouTube videos on how-tos, how to register your club, how to register as a player, and all of those kinds of things. Dues are going to be a little bit different than last year. Last year, TRU dues were reduced to $25. There were no dues. USA dues were dropped to $35, and then there was a training membership of $26.50. This year, dues are returning to the pre-pandemic levels. So your out-of-pocket is $100 for a player, $50 to a combination of USA Rugby and the Senior Club Council, which now the Senior Club Council runs national championships and those kinds of things, and $50 to TRU. One thing that we did reduce, coaches, while USA cut a portion of player dues, they didn't provide any cut to coaches, and TRU reduced what we charge for coaches to $50 from $65, which was matching what USA charged, to basically make sure that there wasn't a dues increase that coaches were experiencing above the 2019-20 amounts that they would have paid. So if you look at it, I know people don't really care about or focus on all the little line items a lot of times, but it's $100 for a player and $130 for a coach, which is what it was in 2019-20. There is still the training membership, the discounted $26.50 option, where you just pay USA Rugby and you get the insurance coverage and you can train. But in order to play in league games, you have to be a fully registered member, and that $26.50 would apply to your full membership. So for folks who are worried about, are we going to have a season? I don't want to register if there's not going to be games. That is one option. You can say, well, look, pay the $26.50, come to practice, and when there's a schedule, that $26.50 will apply towards your full registration. So it's almost like registering on a payment plan. And that was there last year as well, and it is still available this year. CMS, we're going back to the same CMS that we've always used. We're not going to be using the Sport Lomo CMS. The Sport Lomo CMS is a nightmare that you want no part of. Wendy, would you concur? I know you've looked at it.
All of Sport Lomo is a nightmare.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Kat. Yeah. So we are going to be going back to the USA Rugby competition management system that we've used in years past. Their work is underway to integrate the Sport Lomo membership database to the old CMS, just like the old USA Rugby WebPoint membership database was linked to the old CMS. So hopefully you'll be able to have your rosters, your schedule, your standings, all of that stuff will look like it has in years past. Any other questions on registration?
Did we get the Sport Lomo to do club dues? Yeah, I know there was an issue with that last year. So the players can just pay in one place.
I need to check. I haven't personally interacted with that piece of the system, but I can find out for you.
Okay.
Let me make a note here before I forget. And that was Andrew Chapman, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yep. Yes, that's correct.
We'll publish it to everybody, but just, make sure. Okay.
Yeah. Trying to get people to pay it, if it's in one place, then they know where to go, you see.
Well, that is supposed to have been one of the features or improvements, enhancements that we were supposed to get with this Sport Lomo system.
I remember, yeah.
As opposed to grief. But yeah, now I will tell everybody that USA Rugby does have a committee that is set up to review the membership system and is already started meeting in reviewing options for next year, and whether we stick with Sport Lomo or change to something else. And I'm on that committee. So we are evaluating alternatives, but we weren't able to get that work completed prior to this registration cycle. And we felt it was better to take the time and get it right than to stir things up and make it worse.
And I know when I had some issues last year, and I know that USA Rugby was working on getting a system to manage all the education certificates and stuff like that. Now, I do see my stuff in Sport Lomo now, but I didn't know if there was like a a new portal or something that we're supposed to
there is
maintain
a
our stuff?
there is a new learning management system portal that is supposed to be coming online here very soon.
Okay.
It is connected to Sport Lomo. I spoke with Jonathan Atkinson at the national office about that just last week. And we do hope that the learning management portal will be online by the end of September.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
I have questions on the, I saw in the minutes, there was discussion on how the integration between Sport Lomo and CMS is going to work. Do we have any more information on that?
Well, the intent is for it to work exactly the way that the integration back in the day between WebPoint and CMS worked, which is the Sport Lomo folks are working on exposing an API so that the CMS can pull that membership data, in real time from the Sport Lomo membership database. So you go and you register in Sport Lomo, and you should then be able to show up in CMS and be added to a roster on Saturday.
Okay, so if I'm entering in stats for a cup match, it's going to be just like it was 2 years ago?
That's the intent, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 years ago, we didn't have an all-in-one CMS and registration system. We had the CMS, and then USA Rugby had a different registration vendor called WebPoint, as opposed to the current registration vendor, Sport Lomo. And so the CMS has always had the hooks in it to pull from whatever membership system USA Rugby chose to use. The problem was when USA Rugby decided to go with Sport Lomo, they were sold on Sport Lomo as a one-stop shop that would provide competition management, referee assignment, all of it under one roof. And Sport Lomo wasn't able to deliver on that promise.
On the Sport Lomo side, I don't remember specifics now, but I do remember when we were trying to make sure guys were sipped, figuring out the status. On the admin side or the club side, there was some difficulty with guys figuring out where guys actually were sipped, or their level. Has any of that? Has there been any more functionality added to that?
There have been a lot of improvements in the reporting so that you could download a roster or get a report or a list on screen of all of your folks. When you say what level they're registered at, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, for example, so we have since there weren't any cup matches, there were guys who came play with us. Hypothetically, you got a guy who maybe he's a college guy wants to play in a match. He says he sipped, so looking him up and confirming things.
Oh yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah, there have been a lot of improvements in terms of the reporting and being able to look things up. Now, I say that I'm not going to promise that it's great, but they've done a lot of work on improving that.
Okay.
I think there's still a ways to go, but yeah. But I also would hope that when we return to normal competitions, if and when we can return to normal competitions, those college guys, they'll be playing for their colleges like they were back in the day.
Right.
And so you'll have less challenging landscape to manage because you're going to be playing cup games instead of these anybody can play games, and those cup games are going to be from your club's roster.
Right.
Yeah, guest players is something that none of the systems that USA Rugby's ever had really deals with well.
Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, USA Rugby had their weekend SIP. I'm thinking along the lines of us being able to recruit and draw old boys back in. Has there been a consideration of, because the way the USA Rugby does it can be complicated, something along the lines for the TRU instituting a weekend SIP and then and then whatever their TRU dues, counting towards, let's say in a month, I talk them into getting full SIP.
We have not discussed that. Right now, the USA Rugby weekend SIP it has to be a sanctioned event, and that's because of the USA Rugby insurance, and so really that's built around the liability insurance and protecting USA Rugby from liability if somebody breaks their neck at an old boys tournament, and for those events, you don't have to pay TRU dues to go play at Ruggerfest. If you got the weekend SIP from USA Rugby, there's no TRU due necessary. From our perspective, you only need to pay TRU dues if you're going to participate in our competitions, which are our league competitions. And I don't think the weekend SIP, I don't think you're required to pay any GU due with the weekend SIP.
Right. So that's why my thinking was, if the TRU did something similar along the lines of, because there's always some guy who has it in his head he won't pay $50 because it's for a whole season.
Oh, he wants a prorated TRU due because he joined with 3 games left in the year. Right. And why should I pay? Yeah, we have not talked about that. That's something that we can discuss. But no, we haven't had any discussions about doing that. Not in the last year anyway.
Yeah. Because
what about the at-large registration? Doesn't that just do USA dues?
Well, no, he's talking about, let's say I join a club in the middle of the season. I do want to play in league matches, so I need to be fully registered, including as a member of the TRU. But I don't want to pay a full season's registration because I'm only playing 3 of the 10 games. And yeah, we haven't discussed prorating TRU dues based on where we are in the season.
Okay.
And I haven't done the financial analysis of or put any brain cells on what financial impact that might have on us, whether that would be a net gain or a net loss, in terms of our revenue and what it does to our budget. Something we would have to consider. Anything else on software? All right, rocking on to competition. So as Daji said, the schedule is on its way out. We'll get it very shortly. We do have a national championship and Red River TRU, schedules in terms of playoffs. Those are up on your screen now. National championships are going to be a little bit earlier than they have been in years past because we're basically cutting out a round in order to reduce travel and reduce expenses on clubs. It was something that a majority of the unions in the club council really wanted to do, was address the travel. So for our Division 1, it really won't change much because our Division 1 was already basically playing their Red River TRU finals as their regionals of nationals. But for our D2 and D3 clubs, both men's and women's, it will be cutting out one layer of that playoff pathway for folks in a lot of ways. So we'll have TRU championships at the end of April, 23rd and 24th. And then 2 weeks later, USA regional playoffs on May 7th and 8th. And then the national championships on May 21st. That will give us a little bit more of a break between 15s and the startup of 7s. So for those teams that do advance all the way to national finals or national playoffs, they may find that playing 7s, back to back after a nationals 15 strip is is a little bit more doable. And then the date of National Sevens is still TBD, but I have no reason to think that it'll be anything other than the second week in August like it has been for the last umpteen gajillion years. And that's really just driven by the seasonality. We have parts of the country that start playing 15s in mid to late August. So we can't really push National Sevens any further back or any further forward. It kind of needs to sit in that spot.
Sure. This is Dodgy. One thing that's probably worth mentioning is I have been told that our playoff pathway is now east, not west.
Correct.
For the men.
For the men, but not the women. Wendy?
The women is still west. Yeah.
Yeah. So what that means is that it may mean for our D1, depending upon the state of Division I rugby to the east of us, that we wind up with an easier path or a bye at some point heading into nationals for D1 men. But for D2 and D3 men, the only real change is instead of playing D3 playing Chico from Northern California, maybe you're playing Battleship from Mobile, Alabama. And instead of going to Tucson, if it's not in Texas, maybe you're going to Atlanta or New Orleans if it's not in Texas. So there's a chance that it will actually ease our path into a national final based on relative competitiveness of the regions. But the number of games is the same. And one thing that we were adamant about is that we couldn't create a situation where, let's say, if Blacks D1 and D3 were to qualify for nationals again, that they weren't having to send teams to opposite coasts. Want to make sure that teams within a club can travel together.
Yep, that makes sense. Do we have more information available on that? The structure of that?
There should be some. I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but
okay.
we should be able to get you more. Yeah.
Yeah, I as a club that has done that before, gone outside of the TRU or RRC competition, I'd like to see where we may be down the line.
Yeah, we don't have a destination yet. So the hosts for those for that playoff event in May, that regional event, has not yet been determined.
Right.
So in theory, it could be in Texas.
I meant more generically. So we're gonna, like you said, hey, we may be playing instead of playing the Pacific champ, we're gonna be playing.
It'll be a True South, Florida, Georgia, Carolinas.
All right.
Michael, I'll work to get more structural information on that and distribute it as it's received.
All right, great. Thanks a bunch.
Okay.
I think we got to go back. We skipped some things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We jumped around. It was natural, right?
It was organic. I think that's the word you want. So we've got the summit November 5th through 7th. Normally the summit and Hall of Fame traditionally had been in August, but it was canceled last year, and this year we postponed it to November, and that was largely at the request of a lot of our existing Hall of Fame members, a lot of whom are elderly. And when we had to start planning the event, we were, this event's got to be planned 6-8 months out. there was a lot of concern whether August was too soon. And as it turns out, it probably was. So we're looking at November 5th, 5th through 7th in Austin or in Pflugerville, up on the north side of Austin. It'll be a big Hall of Fame banquet because we've got 2 classes to induct, since last year's Hall of Fame class didn't get an induction ceremony due to COVID. So we'll have both last year's class and this year's class inducted into the TRU Hall of Fame on Saturday night. And we'll have coaching and referee courses all during the weekend, as we have in previous years. And it'll be a big, good thing. And it's been, it's really become a neat event, and it's become an event that, with the cancellation of the USA Development Summit, is kind of unusual in the country these days. I don't know if it's unique, but it's pretty unusual. So we would encourage everybody to come on out and support your members who are being inducted, support your mates. And I think, are we sold out on the banquet, Wendy? We're dang close.
Yeah, we're really close. We've sold over 200 tickets already. And that doesn't include, like, we need to get some Fort Worth members in there. So I'm holding some tickets back for them. So I would say we have about 20 tickets left.
Yeah. So if you want a ticket for the Hall of Fame, act now.
And for the summit, I emailed everybody yesterday, all the current members, that we're opening registration to TRU members first this year. Usually we just open it to the public, but we've heard that there will potentially be a lot of outside interest just because there aren't very many courses happening. You can't get at level 200 anywhere in the country, really. I think there's like 3 courses right now. So we're opening it to our members. I'm going to keep it open for like 2 to 3 weeks so that you guys can make sure you get registered, and then we'll open it to the public as well. So we always say get registered early because it sells out every single year, but I really, really encourage it. Don't wait. Yeah. If you need to get level 200 or level 300 or want to do strength and conditioning or referee, do not wait this year.
Yeah. And that goes to Mike Norton's question about what are other unions doing in terms of COVID. One of the reasons that there is a lot of interest in our summit this year is because courses have been shut down across the country. Level 2, they do level 300s virtual now, but level 200, it's considered there's enough safety stuff and how to coach tackling, how to coach scrummaging, that the World Rugby is not comfortable doing level 200s without some in-person instruction. And so folks who need level 200s are having a hard time finding them outside of certain regions of the country, like Texas. And so the interest in our summit is a function of Texas being more open than a lot of unions. But it is a moving target. I know Midwest is, I think, starts play this weekend. Or is trying to.
And right now with the summit, World Rugby is requiring masks for all events. We'll have COVID monitors. So just so you guys know, we're going to just keep monitoring. If cases go down and up, we'll work with World Rugby because these are World Rugby courses. We'll work with them on what that means and implications. So we'll just keep you in the loop there.
And that is masks, but not vaccinations, correct, Wendy?
Correct. Yeah, there's nothing on vaccines yet. Also wanted to just let you know that the December 4th and 5th weekend is Women's All-Star. So we'll have our tryouts earlier in the season and have a team. And then the 50th anniversary tournament we're holding, it'll be open for all members, no entry fee. We just want you to come and play some rugby. It can be kind of a dust off the rust tournament. So it's men and women's. And we are looking for a venue. We had one lined up and then they had to pull out. So we're looking for a venue, but we'd like to be in Houston. So I know we've got a couple Houston teams on on the call. So we'll be definitely reaching out as we need a location.
There was some interest from the Midwest in sending their men's all-stars down for that as well. I need to follow up with Gary Loba about that, but early on.
They'll be bringing their women's side, and then they asked if they could bring their men's side. So yeah, it's exciting.
And all right, what's next, Wendy?
All right, so now I think we're up to board
elections now. Okay, thanks. So or maybe you don't know, the TRU terms on the board are 3-year terms, and they don't all come up in the same year. They're on a rolling basis so that we have consistency on the board and we don't turn over the entire board in a single year. This year, the men's D2 and D3 reps were up for re-election. The incumbent for men's D2, Zachary Hiller, was nominated and accepted, and there were no other nominations submitted by the nomination deadline. So for men's D2, Zach will be re-elected to a second term as the men's D2 rep. For men's D3, we have 2 nominations. We have John Curlis from Grand Prairie and Kevin Phillipson from Abilene. John is the incumbent. And so there will be voting, and it will be online electronic voting as in years past. 1 club, 1 vote. The clubs are that are eligible to vote are the clubs that are all the D3 clubs, and a club votes in the division that its highest side plays in. So Reds D3 and Blacks D3 and Huns D3 do not have votes in this election. These are all the what people might call the true or D3 only clubs that would vote for this board seat. And ballots will be going out to all of those club presidents. 1 club, 1 vote. How long is voting open for, Wendy?
I think 5 days. Let me double check. I have it right here.
Okay.
Till September 1st.
Till September 1st. Then when all the votes are in and tallied and validated. From Jeff Robertson, the D4 clubs vote with D3. So it's D3 and D4 teams vote for that D3 rep. And here is the list of eligible clubs. Now, on that list of eligible clubs, I don't see, we may have missed the D4 clubs in this list.
Wendy. We did, I forgot, I'm sorry. I'll fix it.
So there are a couple of clubs that need to be added to this list. But we did work through, we worked through this last spring with some Red River Committee elections. Because of COVID, we had clubs that didn't have the numbers registered that they might have had in years past. And normally in a typical year, you have to have 15 registered members and a level 200 coach in order to be in good standing, and only clubs in good standing could vote. Because of COVID, we had some clubs that were not, didn't have 15 players or a 200 coach during a COVID shortened year. So basically we looked at all of the clubs that were in good standing when the COVID shutdown happened in the spring of 2020. And then if those clubs had either attended an AGM or responded to our surveys or had registered the requisite number of members. Basically, we didn't just out of hand shut a club down or not let them vote because they didn't meet that minimum number of registrations due to COVID. If they were in good standing before and they were still actively participating in union activities, then they still get their vote. But if a club folded over the season, well, that's a different issue. So we did go through that analysis with all of those clubs to make sure that everybody would be eligible. So we'll get that list out and make sure that that goes to everybody who's eligible to vote. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
In a minute.
Yes, sir.
Great. So what I would like to do, I believe we have both John and Kevin present. And if so, I would give each of them a couple of minutes to, make their pitch or field questions from the group. And I guess we'll start with Kevin. Why don't you go first?
Well, thanks, Kirk. I came to Texas 2 years ago. I ran for an office in the first year I was in Texas and wasn't successful. I have continued to be pretty heavily involved in rugby and especially West Texas area, trying to grow rugby out here. I coach a college team in the Lone Star Conference, and I am growing our Abilene D4, D3 type program. I am looking to get more involved. My background is pretty extensive in the rugby world. I was on the board with Anscro 15, 16, 16, 17, 18. I have two rugby focused businesses. One is a company called Performance Rugby Analytics. We do development strategies, and our primary clients are national teams. We currently work with the Kenyan national team in their qualification for the World Cup. And we are working with the Jamaican national team to develop their 10-year strategy to grow their program. So we have an extensive involvement. I have extensive involvement in rugby at all levels. A lot of strategic planning, a lot of player development, coach development, and all of those kind of things. What I'm hoping to bring to the D3 program is to be able to help the coaches develop and be able to provide support for them, answer questions, perhaps give them ideas on how to improve their coaching and those kind of things, because something I've seen through my business involvements, there's certain areas in the coaching styles that is creating inherent problems in skill development. And we've put together some pretty interesting ways to approach that. I'm hoping to get the vote. I know a lot of you don't know me. Some of you have met me a couple times. If you're looking for something change, post-COVID, we're moving forward. I think I'm the guy to be able to bring some good change to TRU. Any questions on my side?
Any questions for Kevin?
I think this is James from Corpus Christi, and having been involved in rugby for quite some time, you see very successful clubs, Austin Blacks, the Huns, and their development, obviously the larger pool that they have to draw from, and members, foreign and domestic. If you look at a smaller club like Corpus, how would you propose some development? I know you had mentioned growing the strength with the coaches and the development, but the talent that we do have, how do you see that as growing the sport in these smaller communities and reaching out to, we're obviously football strong here, but how would you propose or suggest or have any ideas or approach that as a Division III rep for that level of recruiting, getting the sport out, getting folks not to be so, for lack of a better word, afraid of rugby? How would you approach that, or do you have a plan for that?
Actually, yes. Here in the Abilene area, I arrived here 2 years ago, as I said, and I have a 15-year-old. That's my background. But she plays. She travels extensively. She's very, very good and growing very, very fast. I have a son that developed and went up through the program, played for St. Bonaventure. He was a Enscrow All-American Rising Star last year. I have looked at the problem we faced when I got out here to Abilene. There was no youth program, none whatsoever. The men's team had 6 people that showed up to practice, and ACU, who I coach, had never even dreamed of going to the state championship. In my first year with them, I took them to the Pac West final right before COVID shut us down, so we never found out where we ended up. But what we are doing out here is we have engaged the youth organizations in the city. We're working with Boys and Girls Club, Brothers Big Sisters. We are working with the YMCA. We have got hold of the Rugby Texas curriculum to be able to go to the ISDs and talk to them about coming in and teaching rugby in the middle school market. And that I see as the main developmental area in the for the growth of rugby is the 10 to 14-year-olds, primarily because they are starting to come into their own aggressively as an individual, boys and girls, and they are wanting something, and not everybody wants to play football, and they don't know what rugby is. So we're educating those. Those are also kids that parents have to be heavily involved because they have to take them to sport. If you focus on the high school, you got boyfriends, girlfriends, cars, jobs, other distractions that they don't show up to practice. If you can cement the 10 to 14-year-olds, get them involved, high school will take care of itself. And the little brothers and sisters that are in elementary school will see their big brothers and sisters playing, and they'll want to come and play. So if you build in the middle, and that's a sweet spot that you can really grow very well. Do the education, work through the ISDs. We've got 3 of the middle schools that are interested in working with us. I'm now working with the men's and ACU players to do their certification so they've all done a 100 certification for coaching, and they're going to be going out with me to these schools and teaching rugby to the kiddos. If we can get those players involved, now we've got little ones that are saying, hey, mom, dad, my coach is playing on Saturday, can we go watch? Now you're starting to get parents involved in supporting the community, supporting the sport. If you're working with the little kids, businesses will want to get involved. They'll sponsor. We picked up 8 sponsors here in Abilene that are very interested in supporting the kids. I have a very, very detailed strategic plan to grow rugby in this area. It's a 10-year plan. It's detailed. It's comprehensive. To the extent that I am presenting my strategic plan at an academic conference in Hawaii in March, with the view that after the conference that will be published in an academic journal and it's the title of the paper is building differentiation using rugby to recruit student athletes. The focus is we need to get varsity level, want of a better term, not NCAA obviously, so varsity level rugby programs in Texas. There are none. And that's a big problem. And that's another growth point. The middle school kids and college, those are your growth points. If we can do that, and as men's and women's clubs, we can support those 2 growth factors, I think we'll see a significant growth. So in Corpus, get out to your little, all your youth programs, the Boys and Girls, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the YMCA, talk to those people, find out what they're doing, offer free programs. I've got development money. I've found people that want to support it. and it's not costing hardly anything to go out and run around on a Saturday. What we're also doing is doing a family touch activities on Sunday evenings, 5 o'clock. We invite families to come out and get the parents involved. Anybody from 10 years old and up can come out and we play some touch. We break everybody up into teams and we run around and play some touch and get the parents involved in a game they've never played. That introduces adults to the game, but the kids, it's like a Happy Meal. Mom and Dad, I want a Happy Meal, stop at McDonald's, now you want an adult's meal. Same thing. Bring the kids out to a touch event on the weekend. Mom, Dad has to take kids to the event. Mom, Dad get involved. Maybe one or two of them will end up playing. That's where you start. Kids, that's where the money is. Adults have to bring the kids. I hope I wasn't long-winded, but James, I hope I answered your question.
No, but that's pretty consistent with most development organizations. I mean, I worked for one, and same concepts, everything you're saying, just kind of as along the same lines. And I agree with you. The youth program is where the support is at, because as one of our members says, he goes, why are you going to sponsor grown men to go play a sport when, you know, you got kids and develop that? So I agree with you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the information.
Welcome.
Okay, John, floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. This is John Curl. So I'm currently with Grand Prairie Maverick Rugby. Been there quite a few years. Held many positions there. President for quite a long time. Been the Triple RC rep now since 2016. Prior to that, I was going back to the early 2010s with the TRU before the Triple RC was not say invented, but when they broke that away. So I've had a lot of experience just from a club level doing different things with the competition committee, with the union. I mean, I have a real strong passion. I mean, to be honest, all I think about is rugby and what I could do to help. I mean, I'm involved with coaching our women's side. We help the high school girls coaching. I mean, it's just anything I can do, I do. So probably too much sometimes, but I think that's kind of why a lot of us are on here doing that. So I'm just kind of looking to, continue, growing the game here in the state, do what I can there, in our area. So just keep helping out every way possible. So, one of the things, being on the committees and stuff in the board, a lot of times is, you gotta, while you wear multiple hats, you got to take your club hat off all the time and make the right decisions. Though it might not be the best for your club in the short term, but in the long run, it's going to be best for the union, and that's what it's all about. Getting everybody, as Kurt would say, getting more people playing good rugby. So that's kind of what my thoughts are as well. Anybody have any questions or?
Yeah, questions for John.
So Grand Prairie is no longer D3, is that correct? And if so, how does that impact your ability to work with?
So we're D1, D3, so we'll be fielding two sides.
Okay, but since your first side, I'm with the Blacks, we're D1. I was under the impression that, like, for example, I couldn't be the D3 rep.
No.
Is that correct? How does that work?
No, anybody can nominate, any club can nominate anyone for a position. The key is that Grand Prairie can't vote for John. Grand Prairie doesn't have a vote. They just have a D1 vote now because they've been promoted.
Okay.
But John is still eligible to serve as a D3 rep. We've had reps in the past who were with clubs that were not in the division that they were representing. There was when I joined the board, I think Doug Corrigan was the D1 rep, and Woodlands were a D2 club.
Okay, and that doesn't impact ability to function on the board. Is that correct?
It does. It doesn't impact any ability to function on the board at all. It is up to the men's D3 clubs whether they think it impacts John's ability to adequately represent their interests.
Okay.
Any other questions for John? I didn't mean to step on you there, John. It just sounded like a procedural bylaws type
Yeah, no problem.
a question. Yeah. Okay, then let's move on to the next item. All right. So we don't have 15s to crow about this year, but we do have members that did very well at the Club National Sevens tournament in Seattle this a few weeks ago. ARPTC finished third in the Women's Cup bracket and did very well. In the Men's Cup bracket, Austin Huns won the plate, so they finished fifth in the Men's Cup bracket. And then Dallas RFC first side also competed in the Men's Cup bracket, but did not place. And then this year, for the first time, we added a second tier to National Club Sevens, what we called the Silver Cup, which was, and both Grand Prairie and Rugby HTX participated in that Silver Cup. Rugby HTX won the Silver Cup, so they won that tier 2. So that 15th is, might be 17th, but if you're talking about all the teams, they won the Silver Cup. So they were first in that tier 2 group. And then Grand Prairie finished at the upper part of that tier 2 group and did very well. Then the yeah, thank you for that, Wendy. The men's or the not the men's, the men's and women's Division I championship have been named after Emil Cygnus. Us old guys remember Emil Cygnus. He was a sevens guru and USA sevens coach, and really helped popularize sevens in the US. And then we had a lot of TRA referees who were representing at National Club Sevens, and by all accounts performed well. And so we, we're in, and our sevens refs, because we played so much sevens in Texas, our sevens reps probably had less rust on them than some of the other refs who were up there. So it's been, it was a very positive sevens season. And the event was actually run almost entirely by volunteers and funded through sponsorships. And we are looking at how we might replicate that for other national championship events. And if we're able to, then that will free up budget money at the club council level to provide additional services and keep improving those events. I think the only person we have on the call who were there is maybe John and Dodgy and Kat. So if any of you guys wanted to chime in on your experiences or your club's experiences with the tournament, feel free.
Hey, Kirk. It's Kat. I would love to chime in. Actually, I wanted to clarify, Rugby HTX, they did win the Silver Cup, and because of that, they were given the chance to play the 15th place team in the Cygnus Cup. And
okay.
Because of that, they beat Oceanside Chiefs, who was 15th. So that's how they.
Oh, gotcha.
They actually placed in the Cygnus bracket, even though they were Silver Cup team, which is just really impressive to kind of show that maybe that's where they should have been.
Gotcha.
So that was cool. And then the referees, we always, like to brag that we have the best sevens referees in the country. And now we have a little bit of stake in that game, because 3 out of the 4 men's quarterfinals were reffed by TRA referees. And the only quarterfinal that wasn't had the Austin Huns in it. So we had Texas teams in all the quarterfinals. And then both semifinals were refereed by Texas referees, and the women's final and the men's.
So you're telling me that out-of-state ref doomed my club to 5th place. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I have a phone number if you'd like to call. He also refereed the final, so he's also on the HSBC circuit, so you can't take too much away from him.
Oh, well, okay.
And then, so I really like to highlight that when you go out of state, like the quality of referees, Texas is good. Texas has got it going. So a lot of teams realize that when they travel out of state, they like look around, they're like, oh, it's like, yeah, not everybody's getting Scott Green and Derek Summers on their club matches. Like, so it was a great weekend.
Dodgy or John, you have anything you want to add? Or Jeff?
I didn't make the trip, so I've got nothing. Okay. I know the guys, they said it was a blast. This is real well organized, and hopefully could go again next year.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd chime in and say, yeah, I thought it was a very well run tournament, particularly given that, you know, the funding that's been there in years past from USA Rugby was not present. I was particularly pleased with the fact that all the matches got streamed as well. I think that was a very good thing to do for the people who couldn't make the trip.
Yeah, and thanks to Eric Geib, the club council competitions chair. He's also the Rocky Mountain president. Eric was in a nonstop battle with the streaming folks all weekend long to say, yes, Field 3 does need to be streamed. Yes. No, you can't pull the camera off of there. You know, the streaming company they were more than happy to reduce their workload and focus their energies on the championship pitch. And Eric held the line on that all weekend long and made sure that all those games got streamed. And that was, you know, that was important, as you say, David. And although Eric is president of the Rocky Mountain GU, he's a Dallas boy. So even in other unions, Texas is running the show. Anything else on our questions or comments on National Club Sevens? All right, rock and roll. Just one plug, as long as we're talking about celebrations. This year is the Texas Rugby Union's 50th anniversary. And so in addition to this being our Hall of Fame banquet, it'll also be our 50th anniversary banquet. I believe do we have polos, Wendy?
Yep, we did a round of polos in March for 50th anniversary. We can do another round if we get enough orders.
Yep. But 50th anniversary polos. In fact, I'm wearing mine right now. And it's a big thing. USA Rugby is not 50 years old. The Texas Rugby Union was one of the regional unions that founded USA Rugby 48 years ago. And so, you know, we have every right to be proud of our history and proud of our union and what we've accomplished. And we've done it in a region that was, until just the last 10 years, was considered a backwater, considered, you know, rural and redneck. And, you know, with the growth in the last few years, nobody would consider Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio small anymore. And with the performance of our teams, both in 15s and 7s nationals over the last 5-6 years, nobody would consider Texas a rugby backwater. We've got the Dallas Jackals are coming into the MLR. We will be the only union in the country that has 3 MLR teams. And I think the only union that has 2 other than us is SoCal with San Diego and LA. So Texas really is becoming at the higher levels a center of rugby in the country. But as I think it was Kevin alluded to earlier, college is one area where Texas is not on par with some of the other levels of the country. But as a senior club union, the TRU is doing very well. One other thing that I just wanted to highlight, we didn't have it on the agenda. There has been a change in the accident insurance coverage. If you didn't see the post on Facebook, last year, the deductible on that insurance was $1,000 for players who had primary insurance and $5,000 for players who did not have primary insurance. That deductible has been reduced to $500 for all players, regardless of whether or not you have primary insurance. So for players who didn't have primary insurance, it's really the difference between having accident insurance now or not having it. I mean, a $5,000 deductible wasn't really worth much. And fortunately, we were able to get that improvement in the insurance coverage without passing the cost, that premium cost, on to the players. USA Rugby, we were able to get USA Rugby to cover that. Big thanks to David Dodge, who is on the club council's audit and risk committee, and from there was asked to sit on the insurance RFP committee that was evaluating insurance options. David did the research. When the provider or the broker came back with several different options, he provided the council with a very detailed recommendation and report, breaking down the loss run rates, breaking down the cost differences in each of the various options. And that gave us the ammunition so that when I and Jill Williamson went to meet with CEO Ross Young and Jonathan Atkinson of the member department to negotiate dues and services for this cycle, we were able to get USA Rugby to agree to extend that improved coverage without passing that cost on to y'all, to the players. So, I know for years people have said, oh, well, the USA accident insurance isn't any good, or the USA accident insurance is, doesn't cover much. Encourage, if players, get injured, encourage them to go ahead and file a claim. They may find that they're going to get better coverage than they anticipated, or that, anecdotes from 3 or 4 years ago would lead them to believe. That's it. Any questions? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we will be reconvening for our mid-year meeting in the spring. It's usually around Super Bowl time-ish for our mid-year meeting. And as always, both the competitions committee meeting minutes and the TRU board minutes will be posted on the website and linked on Facebook. So follow along. If you have questions, reach out to us. Look for that schedule that's coming your way. And if you are a D3 or D4 club, make sure you vote in the board election. And if there's nothing else, we'll call this a meeting. See, I see one thing in chat. Let me make sure I haven't missed something. It's Kevin. Kevin posted some information in chat. If you're interested, you might want to grab and copy and paste that before I shut the call down.
Where did that little piece of shit?
What's that?